The Alpha King sold Nera Ashen for a treaty no one meant to honor. They brought her into the Frost Hall with iron around her wrists, bare feet blue from the northern stone, and a winter veil thrown over her hair as if shame needed ceremony. Behind her stood the soldiers of Ravenglen. Before her waited the enemy kingdom of Dravengard, all black banners, wolf-bone pillars, and men who wore fur from beasts large enough to swallow horses. Between them lay the treaty table. Upon it rested three things: a silver knife, a bowl of frozen wine, and Nera's name written on a strip of white skin. Not parchment, skin. The court wanted her to see it. Alpha King Kael Draven sat at the southern end of the hall, golden-haired, beautiful in the cold way statues were beautiful. He had once been her king. That was what they had told her when she was small and hungry, when the pack left scraps outside the Omega quarters and called it mercy. A king protects every wolf beneath his moon. Kael had never protected her. Now he watched as if she were a coin being counted. But Lord Odrin watched as if he were waiting to see whether the coin would bleed the right color. Nera Ashen, announced Lord Odrin Vale, Kael's chief counselor. Last Omega of the abandoned Winter Pens, surrendered as living tribute to seal peace between Ravenglen and Dravengard. Living tribute. The words moved through the hall like a blade dragged slowly from its sheath. Nera kept her chin level. It was the only dignity she owned that no one had managed to tax, bruise, or starve out of her. Behind the northern table, the Winter Warlord rose. Kael Draven did not look like the monster Ravenglen mothers used in bedtime threats. He looked worse, because monsters were allowed to be ugly. He was tall, black-haired, broad-shouldered beneath dark armor trimmed with white wolf fur. A scar cut down the side of his throat and disappeared beneath the collar of his war cloak. His eyes were pale gray, almost colorless, like a frozen lake under moonlight. No warmth lived in them, but something watched from behind the cold. Something wounded. Nera felt it before she understood it. A low pressure beneath her ribs. A pull, not toward the man, but toward the shadow at his back. Kael Draven's wolf shadow stood behind him. Huge, black, dying. The beast crouched where no one else seemed willing to look directly, its massive head lowered, frost spreading through its shadow fur in pale cracks. Blue-white ice climbed its ribs. Each breath it took smoked black at the edges. This was not ordinary sickness. Nera had seen fever, starvation, silver poisoning, moon madness. This was death learning how to freeze. Lord Odrin's gaze flicked once toward the wolf shadow. Too quick, too careful. Nera noticed. Kael did too. The warlord's eyes moved to her chains. You send me an Omega in iron. Kael smiled. A necessary precaution. She was found near stores poisoned during the border famine. I stole bread, Nera said. The hall fell silent. Kael's smile thinners. Lord Odrin turned slowly. You stole from winter soldiers. I stole what they threw to the dogs. A few southern nobles whispered. One laughed under his breath. Kael did not. His gaze fixed on her as if the words had not amused him, but struck some colder place. Kael leaned back in his chair. You see why she is being given away. Nera looked at him then, not angrily. She had spent too many years learning that anger was a luxury fed people wore well. I was not given, she said. I was discarded. The iron around her wrists burned as one guard struck her hard across the mouth. Blood touched her tongue. Kael moved. Barely. One step. The entire northern side of the hall shifted with him. Hands went to sword hilts. Wolf shadows lifted their heads. Even Kael's smile paused. Kael looked at the guard who had struck her. Does Ravenglen beat its tribute before delivery? Kael's eyes cooled. Does Dravengard pity stolen bread? No. Kael's voice was low. We remember hunger properly. Nera did not know what to do with that answer. Pity she understood how to survive. Respect was more dangerous. Lord Odrin lifted the silver knife from the treaty table. The offering must be marked. One cut across the palm, her blood in the treaty wine. Then she belongs to Dravengard until death, exchange, or royal release. Nera's stomach tightened. Belongs. The word had followed her from one cold room to another all her life. A guard forced her hand open. The knife touched her palm. Kael's wolf shadow suddenly snarled. The sound shook frost from the rafters. Every warrior in the hall froze. Kael's face hardened. His hand went to his chest, just below the scar at his throat. The dying wolf behind him staggered, its frost-cracked legs buckling beneath its weight. Lord Odrin whispered something under his breath. Soon, the frost on Kael's wolf pulsed once in answer. The knife cut her palm. Blood welled red against her skin. Then the impossible happened. The frost on Kael's dying wolf stopped moving. Not melted, not healed. Stopped. As if death itself had reached for the beast and found Nera's blood standing in its way. The hall went quiet in a way no command could have made. Kael turned toward her bleeding hand. Kaeler stood. Lord Odrin's face lost all color. Nera tried to pull away, but the chain dragged her forward. One drop of her blood fell from her palm onto the frozen stone between the treaty table and the warlord's shadow. Kael's wolf lifted its head. Its pale, dying eyes opened fully. Then the black beast crawled toward her on shaking legs, past kings, past soldiers, past every law written to keep enemies apart. It lowered its frozen muzzle to Nera's bleeding hand, and for the first time all winter, the death frost cracked. The crack in the death frost sounded like a bone breaking under ice. Every wolf in the frost hall heard it. The northern warriors went still, their hands locked around sword hilts. Ravenglen's soldiers shifted backward, as if the sound had accused them personally. At the treaty table, the frozen wine split down the middle, red beneath the ice like a wound that had been waiting to open. Nera did not move. Kael Draven's wolf shadow kept its muzzle pressed to her bleeding palm. The beast was enormous, even half collapsed, black fur dimmed by blue-white frost, ribs showing through shadow and cold. Its breath smoked against her wrist. The iron chain around her hands rattled because her fingers had begun to shake, but she did not pull away. She should have been afraid of the wolf. She was. But fear had layers. There was the fear of teeth, and then there was the older fear of watching something suffer, while everyone powerful pretended suffering was useful. The wolf's dying eyes fixed on her. Something passed through Nera's blood. Not healing. Not warmth. Mercy. The kind that did not ask whether the wounded thing deserved to live before reaching toward it. A thin line of red light moved from her cut palm into the wolf's frozen muzzle. The frost along its jaw cracked again, spreading outward in delicate lines like breaking glass. Kael inhaled sharply. His hand went to his own throat scar. Nera saw pain cross his face. Not weakness. Recognition. Lord Odrin slammed his palm onto the treaty table. Pull her back. The Ravenglen guard yanked Nera's chain. Kael's wolf growled. The guard froze. So did the chain. It did not break. It simply stopped obeying the hand that held it. Frost climbed the iron links, but where Nera's blood touched the metal, the frost turned pale red and held still. Kael looked at the chain, then at her. What did Ravenglen bury in you? The question was quiet enough to be dangerous. Nera wanted to answer with the truth she had been given all her life. Nothing. Omega. Scrap. Winter pen waste. But the dying wolf still pressed its muzzle to her palm, and for once, the old words did not fit around her throat. I don't know, she said. Kaelor stepped from the southern table. She is tribute. Nothing more. Kael's eyes cut to him. My wolf disagrees. The hall tightened. Kaelor's beautiful face remained smooth, but Nera saw the anger beneath it. He had not expected this, or perhaps he had expected it and hoped everyone else would miss the meaning. Lord Odrin did not miss it. His gaze was fixed on Nera's blood with a hunger that made her skin crawl. The wound must be sealed, Odrin said. The tribute rite is incomplete. He lifted the frozen wine bowl. Nera understood too late. Her blood was supposed to go into the treaty wine. Not because of tradition, because they wanted to see what it did when mixed with the war oath. They had brought her here to test a secret in front of enemies and call it ceremony. Kael seemed to reach the same conclusion. No, he said. One word. The northern wolves lowered their heads. Odrin smiled thinly. With respect, Warlord King, she has not yet been accepted by Dravengard. Until the blood enters the bowl, she remains Ravenglen's offering. Offering. Not woman. Not even servant. A thing between ownerships. Nera pulled her bleeding hand from the wolf's muzzle at last. The beast made a low sound, almost pained, but did not stop her. She faced Odrin. You knew. The old counselor's eyes flickered. You knew my blood would touch his wolf. Kaelor's voice turned cold. Be silent. But silence had always been the only thing Ravenglen had given her in abundance. Tonight, something in her was too tired to accept more. You sold me because you wanted my blood near him, she said. Not to seal peace, to prove something. Odrin's hand tightened around the bowl. The frost on Kael's wolf pulsed again. This time, everyone saw it. Kael moved so fast the air seemed to split. One moment he stood beside the northern table. The next, his hand closed around Odrin's wrist, stopping the wine bowl inches above Nera's bloodied palm. The hall erupted in steel. Swords came halfway out of sheaths. Wolf shadows rose behind warriors like black flames. Kaelor's own wolf shadow appeared behind him, golden tall, but its edges flickered strangely, as if moonlight did not fully trust it. Kael noticed. So did Nera. For one heartbeat, the two rival kings stood across from each other with Nera chained between them and a dying wolf at her feet. Kael's voice was low. You brought me poisoned peace. Kaelor's smile vanished. I brought you tribute. No. Kael looked down at Nera's bleeding hand, then at his wolf, then at the frozen wine splitting red beneath the ice. You brought me the thing your council feared I would survive. Odrin twisted his wrist, but Kael did not release him. The old counselor's composure cracked. Her blood is forbidden for a reason. The word moved through the hall. Forbidden. Nera felt it enter her like a hook. Kael's eyes returned to her. Not soft, not trusting, but sharper now, as if the shape of her danger had made her real to him. What blood? He asked. Odrin said nothing. The wolf answered. It lifted its head from the stone. Death frost still covered half its body, but its voice rose through the hall like winter breaking open under the moon. Not tribute. The words did not come from its mouth alone. They came from the frost, from the blood, from the red light trembling between Nera's fingers. Oath blood. Kaelor's hand moved to the inside of his sleeve, then stopped when Kael looked at him. Odrin dropped the frozen wine bowl. It shattered against the stone, and the red ice inside spread into the shape of a wolf's open eye. Nera looked at it, unable to breathe. Inside the frozen eye, she saw a memory that was not hers. Two armies facing each other in a white valley. A black wolf collapsing under blue frost. A golden king's council pouring winter poison into the border wells. And a woman with Nera's eyes cutting her palm over a dying enemy wolf, whispering, mercy is not treason when war itself is the lie. The vision vanished. Kael released Odrin so violently the old counselor staggered backward. Nera Ashen, the Winter Warlord said. Her name in his mouth sounded less like ownership than summons. She looked up. His dying wolf dragged itself closer until its shadow covered her chains. Who was your mother? Nera could have answered. Should have answered. But Lord Odrin moved first. From inside his sleeve, he drew a needle of blue ice and drove it into the broken treaty table. The frost exploded outward. Not at Kael, not at his wolf. At Nera. Kael reached for her. Too late. The death frost climbed her chains, sealed around her wrists, and dragged her down through the stone floor as if winter itself had opened its mouth beneath her. The last thing she saw was Kael's wolf lunging after her. The last thing she heard was Odrin's voice above the cracking ice. Bury the mercy before it names the war. Ice did not swallow Nera gently. It took her like a mouth with teeth. One moment the frost hall was above her, steel flashing, wolves snarling, Kael Draven reaching through a storm of blue-white frost, and the next she was falling through frozen darkness with her wrists locked together and her blood burning against the chains. The stone closed overhead. Sound vanished. Cold wrapped around her ribs so tightly she could not scream. Nera struck a floor that should not have existed beneath the hall. The impact drove the breath from her lungs. For several heartbeats she lay curled on her side, cheek pressed to black ice, tasting blood and winter. The chains around her wrists had frozen solid, but the cut in her palm still glowed red. Not bright, stubborn, like a coal buried under snow. She pushed herself up. A tunnel stretched before her, carved beneath the frost hall. Its walls were not stone. They were packed layers of ancient ice, and inside that ice floated things that made her stomach turn. Broken spearheads, wolf teeth, torn treaty ribbons, small bones wrapped in faded blue thread. The abandoned winter pens had been cold, but this was older, hungrier. This place had been made not to imprison bodies, but to bury evidence where even wolves could not scent it. A voice moved through the ice. Not Odrin's. A woman's. Nera. She turned too quickly, slipping on the frozen floor. No one stood behind her. Only a dark shape beneath the ice wall, half hidden under layers of frost. Nera crawled closer, her breath scraping. Inside the wall, preserved as if winter had refused to let her die properly, was a woman with dark hair and hollow cheeks. Her palm was cut open. Red ice bloomed around her hand. The face was not Nera's, but the eyes were close enough to steal the strength from her knees. Mother. The word did not reach her mouth. She had no memory of her mother's face. Ravenglen had given her only a name once, muttered by an old washerwoman who died before winter, Nera Ashen. After that, the pack records called Nera motherless, stray-born, pen-raised. The woman in the ice opened her eyes. Nera fell backward. Not dead, not living. Held. My little mercy, the woman whispered through the wall. Nera shook her head. No. The word came out broken. The ice around Sarah's mouth cracked faintly. They told you I died? They told me nothing. Sorrow moved through her mother's frozen face. That is worse. Above them, a distant impact shook the tunnel. Kael. Nera felt it before she heard it, the force of a wolf shadow slamming against whatever sealed this buried place. Frost rained from the ceiling. Somewhere far overhead, the dying black wolf howled, and the sound reached Nera like pain traveling through a blade. Her blood answered. The cut in her palm brightened. Sarah's eyes moved to it. He found you. Who? The enemy wolf. Nera almost laughed, but the sound would have been too close to sobbing. He was dying. Yes. My blood stopped it. Yes. Why? Sarah's frozen hand twitched inside the ice, unable to lift. Because winter, mercy, blood, was made before Ravenglen and Ravengard learned to call each other enemies. The words sank into Nera slowly. Winter mercy. She had never heard them spoken, but her body knew them. The same way her blood had known the wolf's pain before her mind understood it. Sarah continued, voice faint. Our line was forbidden because we could save enemy wolves. We could cross war without asking permission from kings. That made us dangerous. Another crash shook the tunnel. This time, a crack tore across the ceiling. Nera looked up. A black claw punched through the ice overhead, then vanished as blue frost sealed the hole again. Kael's wolf was trying to reach her. Dying, wounded, half frozen and still trying. Her throat tightened. Sarah saw it. Do not mistake need for trust. I don't. Good. Trust must be earned. Mercy is older. It moves first. Nera looked back at her mother. Why did Kaelor sell me? Sarah's eyes hardened in the ice. Because the war is a lie. The tunnel seemed to grow colder. Years ago, Sarah whispered. Ravenglen poisoned the border wells with death frost and blamed Dravengard. Kael's wolf drank first to protect his soldiers. The frost should have killed him in 3 nights. But it didn't, because I crossed the battlefield and gave my blood. Nera remembered the vision in the red ice, a woman with her eyes cutting her palm over a dying enemy wolf. You saved him. I delayed the frost, not cured it. Sarah's gaze shifted upward as another impact boomed through the tunnel. Odrin found me before I could finish. Kaelor was young then, but not innocent. He saw enough to know what my blood could prove. Nera's stomach turned. So they kept you here. They kept my blood near the curse in case they needed it. Then they kept you alive in the pens because Mercy sometimes wakes late. Her voice thinned. Tonight, they sent you to Dravengard to learn whether your blood had awakened. If it failed, you were disposable. If it worked, they meant to bury you before Kael understood. Nera looked at her chains. Living tribute. The words returned. Fouler now. Not tribute. Test. Sarah's eyes sharpened. Listen to me. Odrin's frost is not only poison, it is oath-bound. It obeys the first lie spoken over it. What lie? That Dravengard began the war. The tunnel trembled again. This time the crack above did not seal fully. A sliver of black shadow forced through, followed by a growl that made every bone in the ice wall vibrate. Nera stood. Sarah's gaze filled with fear. Do not give all your blood to the wolf. Winter, mercy can stop death, but if you pour yourself empty, the frost will take your place. Nera looked at the glowing cut in her palm. All her life, Ravenglen had taken from her because she was nothing. Now the first thing that made her something could still be used until nothing remained. A bitter smile touched her mouth. How do I break the lie? Sarah's frozen lips parted. Before she could answer, blue light flared at the far end of the tunnel. Lord Odrin stepped out of the ice, his robes untouched by snow, the needle of blue frost in his hand. You don't, he said. Nera backed toward her mother's wall. Odrin's eyes passed over Sarah without pity. Your mother asked the same question. She learned obedience eventually. Sarah's face twisted. Nera felt heat rise through her blood. Not fire. Mercy sharpened into anger. Odrin lifted the ice needle. The warlord is above us, tearing apart my seal for an omega he should have killed on sight. Useful, in its way. When he breaks through, his wolf will follow your blood down here, and the death frost will finish what Ravenglen began. A crack split open overhead. A black muzzle forced through. Kael's wolf. Its frost-covered eyes found Nera. Odrin smiled. Call it to you. Nera stared at the dying beast above her, then at her mother trapped in the wall, then at the man who had buried Mercy under a war. Her bleeding hand closed around the frozen chain at her wrists. No. The word was small. The ice heard it anyway. Red light ran from her palm through the chain, not breaking it, not yet, but changing the color of the frost around it. Odrin's smile faded. Nera lifted her chained hands toward the wolf above. If you want him, she said, come through me first. The wall behind her cracked. Nera Ashen opened her frozen mouth, and every bone hidden in the ice began to howl. The howl did not rise from throats. It rose from the walls. Every small bone trapped inside the ancient ice began to shake, each one carrying a sound that had been buried before it could become a name. The tunnel filled with the cries of wolves that had died thirsty, soldiers who had drunk from poisoned wells, and mercy-blood women dragged beneath winter before their hands could finish healing what kings had ruined. Odrin stepped back. For the first time, Nera saw fear reach his face before calculation could cover it. The blue needle in his hand flared. Enough! He drove it toward the ice floor. Nera moved first. She did not know she could. One heartbeat she was chained against the wall beneath her mother's frozen prison. The next, she was between Odrin and the frost seal, both wrists locked together, blood from her palm running down the iron links. The needle struck her chain. Pain exploded through her arms. Blue frost surged up the iron. trying to climb into her blood, trying to make her veins another road for the old lie. Nera screamed, but she held the chain against the needle and felt the red light in her palm push back. Not fire, not warmth, a refusal. Above her, Kael's wolf slammed its black muzzle through the crack in the ceiling. Jaws bared, frost breaking from its face in jagged sheets. It was dying faster now. Every strike against the seal cost it strength. Death frost crawled over one eye, dimming the silver-black rage inside it. "Stop," Nera shouted at the wolf. "You'll kill yourself." The beast did not withdraw. Its gaze fixed on Odrin. Odrin laughed sharply. Even now it chooses violence over survival. That is why Dravengard had to be blamed. They made war easy to believe. The crack overhead widened. A human hand punched through the ice beside the wolf's muzzle. Kael's. Blood ran from his knuckles. He was breaking through the buried seal with his own body. "Nera!" His voice came distorted through layers of frost. Her name sounded different now. Not summons. Warning. Odrin heard it too. His eyes narrowed with satisfaction. "Good. Let him see what your mercy costs." He twisted the needle. The chain around Nera's wrists turned white-hot cold. The red glow in her palm flickered. Behind her, Sarah's frozen wall split from floor to ceiling. "Nera," her mother said, voice trembling through the ice, "do not fight the frost as if it is only death. Ask what it was ordered to remember." Nera gasped through pain. "Ordered? Oath-bound," Sarah whispered. "It obeys the first lie." The first lie. Dravengard began the war. Nera looked at the blue frost climbing her chains. It moved like a living thing, but beneath its hunger there was rhythm. Words. A command repeated until winter itself believed it. "Enemy, enemy, enemy." Odrin shoved the needle deeper. "Do not listen to her. She was always too soft to understand kingdoms." Sarah's eyes flashed. "And you were always too afraid to let peace prove you unnecessary." The insult struck harder than Nera expected. Odrin's jaw tightened. Above them, Kael tore away another slab of ice. His face appeared through the opening, pale, bleeding, furious. His wolf shadow crouched beside him, half in the hall above, half reaching down through the tunnel's broken ceiling. "Move from her," Kael said. Odrin raised his free hand. A sheet of death frost shot upward. Kael braced for it. Nera saw what would happen, a heartbeat before it did. The frost would strike his wounded wolf through the open crack, use its hunger for Nera's blood as a path, and finish the death that had been delayed for years. She dragged the chain sideways with all her strength. The frost missed Kael and struck the wall beside Sarah. Her mother cried out. The ice around Sarah's chest darkened. Nera's breath stopped. Odrin smiled. "Mercy divides badly, child. Choose quickly." Her mother, the wolf, the warlord trying to reach her, herself. All her life, choice had been used against her by people who owned the rooms, the bread, the chains. Now Odrin offered her another impossible choice and expected her to break beautifully inside it. Nera looked at the bones in the wall. They were still howling, not begging, accusing. She understood then. Mercy was not choosing who deserved to live. Mercy was refusing the lie that made death useful. Nera pressed her bleeding palm to the frozen floor. "I do not choose between wounds made by the same hand." The red light spread beneath her fingers. Odrin's eyes widened. No. Nera closed her eyes. The frost beneath the tunnel was filled with the first lie. She could feel it now, threaded through every frozen stone and buried bone. Dravengard began the war. Dravengard poisoned the wells. Dravengard killed the border children. She pushed her blood into the lie, not to heal it, to make it remember. The tunnel vanished. Nera stood in a white valley under a moon without warmth. Ravenglen soldiers moved through the snow carrying sealed jars of blue frost. Odrin walked among them, younger, his cloak clean, his face hard with purpose. Beside him stood Kaelor, younger too, golden and silent. one hand hidden inside his sleeve. "What if the warlord survives?" young Kaelor asked. Odrin smiled. "Then we keep the mercy line alive until we need proof it works." A woman stepped from the trees. Nera Ashen. Her palm was cut. "You have made murder where Dravengard's face," she said. Kaelor looked away, not shocked, ashamed, but not enough to stop it. The vision shattered as Odrin struck Nera across the face with the back of his hand. She hit the ice floor hard. The red light dimmed. Kael dropped through the ceiling. He landed between Nera and Odrin with a crash that split the tunnel wall. His black armor was torn. Blood ran from his temple. His dying wolf shadow forced itself down behind him, too large for the tunnel, its frost-cracked body filling the passage like a collapsing night. Kael lifted his sword. Odrin pressed the needle to Sarah's ice-darkened heart. "Strike me," he said, "and her mother dies before the girl learns the second lie." Kael stopped. Nera pushed herself up on one elbow, blood on her mouth, chains burning red around her wrists. Kael did not look away from Odran, but his voice lowered. "Can you stand?" Nera almost laughed. Instead, she rose, slowly, shaking. "Yes." Kael's wolf turned its dying eyes toward her. Nera looked past Odrin to her mother trapped in the wall. "What is the second lie?" she asked. Sera's lips moved through the ice. Kael heard it. So did Nera. The mercy line did not vanish. It was sold. The mercy line did not vanish. It was sold. The words stayed in the frozen tunnel after Sera's lips stopped moving, sharper than any blade Kael held and colder than the death frost buried under the floor. Nera stood with blood on her mouth, chains glowing red around her wrists, and felt something inside her childhood begin to change shape. All her life, Ravenglen had let her believe she was abandoned because she was worthless, an omega nobody wanted. A mouth fed only enough to survive winter labor, a body useful for punishment, errands, hunger, and finally tribute. But her bloodline had not faded by accident. It had been traded, kept, tested, spent. Kael's sword remained pointed at Odrin's throat, but he did not strike. The blue ice needle rested against Sarah's frozen heart, and one wrong movement would drive it deep enough to end whatever half-life still held Nera's mother inside the wall. Odrin's breathing was calm again. He had found the shape of control and stepped back inside it. "Your mother always did have a talent for making old crimes sound poetic," he said. Sera's eyes burned through the ice. "Tell her." Odrin glanced at Nera. "Tell her what? That mercy has a market, that hungry kingdoms buy what priests outlaw, that bloodlines survive only when powerful men find uses for them." Nera's chains pulsed. The red light brightened. Kael heard the iron creak and shifted one step closer, not touching her, but near enough that his shadow fell across her hands. "Do not let him bait you," he said. Nera almost looked at him. Almost. But if she looked at the Winter Warlord too long, she might remember the way his wolf had crawled to her hand in front of both courts. She might remember that his first defense of her had come before he understood her blood. She might mistake that for safety. Sarah had warned her. Mercy moved first. Trust had to be earned. Nera kept her eyes on Odrin. "Who sold us?" For a heartbeat, the old counselor looked amused. Then the tunnel shook. Above them, in the frost hall, warriors shouted. Steel struck steel. Ravenglen and Dravengard were not waiting peacefully for their kings to return. The treaty had cracked, and armies did what armies had been trained to do when truth became inconvenient. Odrin smiled. "Your own pack elders sold the first Winter, Mercy daughters to Ravenglen 3 generations ago. Not as slaves, not officially. They called them border brides, peace offerings, living cures wrapped in marriage law." Nera's stomach turned. Living tribute, living cure, living lie. Sera closed her eyes. Odrin continued, enjoying each word now. When the church declared winter, mercy blood forbidden, the councils did not destroy it. They placed it where no rival king could claim it openly, in Omega pens, in servant houses, in burial lists. Blood is easiest to hide when everyone agrees the body carrying it has no worth. Kael's sword hand tightened. His wolf shadow growled behind him, frost still clinging to its ribs but no longer spreading, while Nera's blood glowed nearby. Nera heard the grief in that growl, not only for itself, for every wound dressed as law. "What is the second lie?" she asked. Odrin's gaze slid toward Kael. The warlord's face did not change, but the scar on his throat pulled tight. Sarah answered before Odrin could twist it. "They said Kael Draven's wolf killed the border children during the first frost raid." Kael went still. The air changed around him so violently that frost lifted from the floor in tiny shards. Nera looked at him. For the first time since he had stepped into her life like a blade, the Winter Warlord looked afraid to hear the rest. Sarah's voice trembled through the ice. It was not his wolf. Odrin pressed the needle harder against the frozen wall. Sarah gasped, but forced the words out. The children were already dead when Dravengard arrived. Ravenglen's frost stores had broken open near the wells. Odrin needed a monster to carry the blame. Kael's wolf came first because it smelled death and tried to drag the bodies out before the ice took them. Kael's lips parted. No sound came. Nera saw the blow land deeper than steel. His kingdom had been hated for years because of that story. His wolf had carried the name Child Killer while dying from the same frost it had tried to stop. Odrin's eyes glittered. A useful grief. His people became vicious under accusation. Ours became obedient under fear. War simplified every border dispute for 20 years. Kael moved. Not with sword. With his bare hand. He caught Odrin by the front of his robes and slammed him against the ice wall beside Sarah. The needle shook against her mother's chest. Nera cried out, "Kael!" He stopped. The use of his name changed something in the tunnel. His wolf shadow turned toward her. So did the man. For a breath, the war, the lies, the chains, the frozen dead, all of it narrowed to the space between them. Nera had not meant to speak his name as a plea. It had come out like a hand reaching. Kael released Odrin slowly, but his voice, when it came, was almost unrecognizable. "Give me one reason not to tear your throat open." Odrin smiled with blood on his teeth. "Because your wolf still needs her blood. Because her mother still needs my restraint. Because above us, Kaelor is deciding whether to leave with his secret or burn both kingdoms to bury it." The tunnel shook again. This time, the impact came from above and south. A golden light flared through the broken ceiling. Kaelor. Nera felt him before she saw him. Not warmth, not true sunlight. Something polished and false, like a crown held over rot. Kael stepped back from Odrin and looked up. Through the cracked opening, Alpha King Kael Draven stood at the edge of the broken frost hall floor, his golden wolf shadow behind him. In his hand was a small white seal taken from inside his sleeve. The seal pulsed with blue frost. Nera knew it without being told. The piece Odrin had hidden the first lie inside. Kaelor looked down into the tunnel at her, at Sarah in the wall, at Kael's dying wolf, and for the first time his beautiful face had no courtly mask left. Only fear and resentment. "You were supposed to die before this," he said to Nera. The words were not shouted. That made them worse. Kael lifted his sword toward the opening. "Come down and say it, Nera." Kaelor's eyes flicked to him. "Still pretending this Omega matters to you?" Kael's answer came too fast. "She matters to the truth." Nera felt the words strike. "Then settle somewhere dangerous." Kaelor smiled faintly. "Truth does not hold borders. Fear does." He raised the white seal. Odrin's eyes widened. "Majesty, not here." Kaelor ignored him. The golden wolf shadow behind him opened its mouth, and blue frost poured from its jaws. Not natural, not its own. The white seal was forcing the frost through Kaelor's wolf. Kael's wolf surged in front of Nera. The death frost struck the black wolf shadow full in the chest. It roared, collapsing to one knee. Kael staggered as if the blow had pierced his own ribs. Nera's blood flared so bright the tunnel turned red. Sarah screamed from the wall, "Do not pour yourself empty." But Nera was already moving. She drove both chained hands into the frost burning through Kael's wolf. Pain tore up her arms. The death frost tried to enter her. Her blood met it. Not gently, not as healing, as memory. The tunnel vanished again. Nera stood in the white valley of the First War, but now Kaelor stood before her, younger, holding the same white seal. At his feet lay the bodies of border children wrapped in frost. Odrin spoke behind him. "Say Dravengard did this, and your throne survives." Young Kaelor looked at the dead, then at the seal, then at the distant black wolf dragging children from the ice with its teeth, trying too late to save what Ravenglen had already killed. Kaelor whispered, "Dravengard did this." The white seal drank his words. The vision shattered. Nera opened her eyes in the tunnel, screaming. The frost in Kael's wolf cracked wider, not because it was healed, because the second lie had been named. Above them, Kaelor stumbled as the seal in his hand split down the center. Odrin shouted, "Stop her!" Nera looked up through the red glow of her own blood. For the first time, Alpha King Kaelor looked at his abandoned Omega and saw not a tribute, not a test, not a disposable girl from the winter pens. He saw the witness to the lie that held his crown together, and Nera saw exactly why he had sold her. Not because she had no value, because she had too much. The white seal cracked in Kaelor's hand, and the sound made every wolf shadow in the frost hall recoil. Not from fear, from recognition. The seal had been made to hold a lie inside royal blood. Now that lie had a fracture, and through it came the scent of old wells, frozen children, and a battlefield blamed on the wrong kingdom. Nera remained kneeling, with both chained hands pressed against Kael's wolf shadow. The death frost still burned through the black beast's chest, but red light from her blood had forced it to stop spreading. Her arms shook, her vision blurred at the edges. Every beat of her heart seemed to pour more of her into the wolf. Kael caught her shoulder before she collapsed fully. "Enough," he said. His voice was harsh, almost angry. Nera looked up at him through pain. "If I stop, he dies. If you keep going like this, so do you." The words should not have mattered. No one in Ravenglen had ever said her life, and a king's wolf belonged in the same sentence. No one had weighed her survival against something powerful and chosen caution. She did not know how to answer it. Above them, Kaelor stared at the broken seal, his golden wolf shadow flickering behind him with blue frost trapped in its jaws. His perfect face had split into something uglier than rage. "Do not look at me like that," he said. Nera realized he was speaking to her, not to Kael, not to Odrin, to the Omega he had sold. "I was crowned during famine," Kaelor said, voice tightening. "My borders were breaking. My nobles were turning on each other. Dravengard had iron, grain, and wolves bred for war. One story held Ravenglen together." Kael's hand tightened on his sword. "A story built on dead children." Kaelor's eyes flashed. "A kingdom is built on what it survives." "No," Nera said. The tunnel quieted. Even Odrin turned. Nera pushed herself upright, though Kael's hand remained near her, ready if she fell. Her blood still glowed over the frost in his wolf, but she pulled one hand away before Sarah's warning became prophecy. A smear of red remained on the black shadow fur. The wolf breathed. Not well, but alive. Nera faced Kaelor through the hole in the ceiling. A kingdom is built on what it refuses to become. For a moment, Kaelor looked almost wounded. Then Odrin laughed. It was soft and poisonous, beautiful, useless, but beautiful. He pulled the ice needle from Sarah's frozen wall. Sarah gasped. A vein of blue frost remained near her heart, pulsing faintly. Odrin looked up at Kaelor. "Majesty, the seal is cracked. If she names the first and second lie before both courts, the border houses will turn. Dravengard will demand blood debt." Your own soldiers will ask who starved them for a war that should never have begun. Kaelor's jaw tightened. Odrin's voice lowered. Close it now. Kael stepped in front of Nera. Try. Kaelor looked at Kael, and for one breath, the two kings were exactly what songs pretended men like them were. Power, bloodline, command, the kind of violence that could turn a hall into history. Then Kaelor's gaze dropped to Nera. You were easier to pity when you were silent. Nera's mouth tasted of blood. You never pitied me. No, Kaelor said, but I understood your use. He raised the broken seal again. The golden wolf shadow behind him convulsed. Blue frost poured from its mouth, not as a blast this time, but as long, thin threads. They plunged through the broken floor and shot toward every bone in the tunnel walls. Sarah's eyes widened. He is waking the burial frost. The small bones trapped inside the ice began to rattle. Not howl, rattle, as if something was trying to make them march. Odrin smiled. The dead remember fear more easily than mercy. The frost threads wrapped around the bones, pulling them free from the walls one by one. Tiny ribs, wolf teeth, finger bones, broken jaws. They gathered in the tunnel, clicking together beneath Kaelor's seal until shapes began to form. Not wolves, not men, something between. War remnants, bodies made from those who had died under the first lie. Kael's wolf shadow tried to rise. Its front leg shook, frost cracking along its chest. Kael lifted his sword, but Nera saw the problem before he moved. If he fought them, he would shatter the dead. If he did nothing, they would tear through the tunnel and reach the hall above. Odrin had built another choice from cruelty. Nera looked at her mother. How do I stop them? Sarah's face was pale inside the ice. They are not attacking because they hate you. They are obeying the fear they died inside. The bone things turned their hollow faces toward Nera. Blue frost burned where eyes should have been. Enemy. The word crawled through the tunnel. Enemy. Enemy. Kael raised his sword in both hands. Stay behind me. Nera almost obeyed. The old part of her wanted to. The Omega trained to survive by making herself smaller. The abandoned girl who had learned to let others decide where her body could stand. Then one of the bone things opened a broken wolf jaw and released a child's sob. Nera stepped around Kael. His arm shot out, stopping just before touching her chains. Nera. She looked at him. I am not standing behind another king while dead children carry his lie. The words landed between them. Kael lowered his arm. Not easily, but he lowered it. Nera walked toward the bone things with both hands visible, blood drying across her palms. The red light was weaker now. She could feel the cost waiting under her skin, patient as winter. The first bone creature lunged. Kael moved. Nera lifted her hand. No. The creature stopped inches from her throat. Its blue eyes flickered. Nera pressed her bleeding palm to its skull. The tunnel vanished. A child stood before a frozen well, holding a wooden cup. Behind him, soldiers shouted that Dravengard wolves had crossed the border. He did not see Odrin's men breaking jars of blue frost into the water. He only saw the black wolf shadow that arrived too late, teeth closing gently around his coat to pull him away. Then the frost took him. Nera opened her eyes with a sob caught behind her teeth. She touched the next bone thing. A border mother. The next, a young Ravenglen soldier ordered to poison the well and then killed to bury the order. The next, a Dravengard scout who carried warning to Kael and was found frozen with Ravenglen arrows in his back. Each touch brought a memory. Each memory weakened the frost command. Nera swayed. Kael caught her elbow this time. She did not pull away. Stop before you fall, he said. If I stop, they stay enemies. His face tightened. They are dead. No. Nera looked at the bone, things trembling around her. They are evidence. The red glow in her blood spread outward, not into the wolf now, but into the floor beneath every war remnant. The blue frost around them turned pale, then clear. One by one, the bone things lowered themselves to the ice. Not defeated. Released from command. Kael stared down from above, horror breaking through his fury. The cracked seal in his hand split wider. From inside it, a small, rolled strip of treaty skin fell through the air and landed near Nera's feet. Audrin lunged for it. Kael's sword stopped him. Nera bent and picked it up. Her name was not written on this one. Sarah's was. Nera Ashen, Winter Mercy blood, purchased under famine law by Ravenglen crown. Below it was another line. Daughter to be retained until blood wakes. Nera's fingers closed around the strip. For 1 second she could not breathe. She had not been abandoned. She had been inventory. Kael read the truth over her shoulder. The cold that moved through his face was not frost. It was rage held on a leash. Above them, Kael lowered his broken seal. Nera, he said. Her name sounded wrong in his mouth now. Like stolen property trying to become apology. Nera looked up at the king who had sold her and saw the exact moment he understood that she was no longer standing between kingdoms as tribute. She was standing between them as proof. The bone things around her bowed their heads. Kael's dying wolf shadow lowered itself beside her, covering her chains with its black, frost-cracked body. From somewhere deep beneath the tunnel, a red pulse answered her blood. Sarah's eyes widened. The mercy vault, she whispered. Audrin's face twisted. No. The ice floor under Nera's feet opened in a perfect circle, revealing steps descending into red-lit darkness. And from below, 100 women's voices whispered the same word. Daughter. The stairs beneath Nera's feet breathed red light. Not flame. Blood memory. It rose through the circular opening in the ice floor in slow pulses, painting the tunnel walls, the bowed bone things, Kael's dying wolf shadow, and the frozen shape of Nera Ashen in a glow that looked almost warm, until Nera felt how old it was. Daughter. The whisper came again from below. Not one voice. 100. Maybe more. Nera stood at the edge of the open stairwell with the treaty skin clenched in her hand, her name absent from the record because she had never been meant to have a name in law, only a condition. Daughter to be retained until blood wakes. Kael read the words once more over her shoulder. His face went still in a way that frightened her more than open rage. The Winter Warlord's fury did not burn loudly. It sharpened, quiet and lethal, until every breath around him seemed to know better than to move carelessly. They bred a child into a prison, he said. Audrin laughed despite the sword at his throat. Do not dress politics in nursery grief. Bloodlines are preserved by use. Without Ravenglen, her line would have died nameless in border snow. Nera turned toward him. I was nameless because you made me so. The red light below brightened. Audrin's smile thinned. Above them, Kael remained at the broken edge of the frost hall floor, the cracked white seal clutched in his hand. His golden wolf shadow trembled behind him, blue frost still threaded through its jaws. He looked down at the open stairwell, and for the first time since Nera had known him, the Alpha King looked less like a ruler than a man staring at a debt too large to count. Close the vault, he said. No one moved. His voice hardened. Close it. Sarah's frozen eyes lifted. You cannot close what her blood opened. Kael's gaze shifted to Nera. You do not know what sleeps under you. No, Nera said, but I know why you fear it. The first step called to her. Kael caught her wrist before she descended. Not hard. Not like a chain. Still, her body remembered iron faster than intention. She stiffened. Kael released her at once. The gesture was small. The meaning was not. His eyes lowered to the mark the chain had left on her skin. The vault may be another trap. Everything built around me has been. That does not mean you walk into the next one alone. She looked at him then. The dying wolf lay behind him, vast black body cracked with frost, head lowered near her feet. Its breath came raggedly, but the frost had stopped advancing while her blood lit the floor. It watched her the way wounded beasts watched stormlight, wary, needing, too proud to beg. Nera looked back at Kael. If you come with me, your wolf may not survive the climb back." His expression did not change. "Then we do not waste the descent." Something in her chest tightened. Not trust. Not yet, but the shape trust might take if given enough truth to stand on. She stepped onto the first stair. The red light ran up her chains. The iron unlocked. Not broke, unlocked. The shackles fell from her wrists and struck the ice with a sound that made every soul in the tunnel flinch. Nera stared down at her bare wrists. All her life, chains had been removed only by the hands that owned the key. Punishment over, labor reassigned, body transferred. This time, the lock had recognized her before any master gave permission. The 100 voices below whispered again. "Come down, daughter." Kael followed one pace behind her. His wolf shadow dragged itself to the stairwell, but Sarah's voice stopped it. Not yet. The beast bared its teeth weakly. Sarah did not flinch. "If you enter before the frost lie is named at the root, the vault will read you as war and close forever." Kael looked back at his wolf. For the first time, Nera saw pain cross his face unhidden. The wolf gave a low growl, not protest. Permission. Kael bowed his head once, then descended after Nera. Odrin lunged the moment they disappeared below the floor. The bone things rose. Not to attack, to surround him. Their hollow faces turned blue-white, reflecting every child, soldier, and scout his lies had made into weapons. He froze with Kael's sword, still close enough to kiss his throat. Kaelor watched from above, saying nothing. Nera and Kael descended into the Mercy Vault. The stairwell opened into a chamber carved from red ice and black stone. The ceiling hung low with roots frozen in crystal. The walls were filled with handprints, women's hands, hundreds of them, pressed into the ice in dried red light, some small, some old, some marked with rings, some scarred by labor. At the center of the vault stood a basin made of dark wolf bone. It was empty. No, not empty. Waiting. Nera stepped closer, drawn by a pressure under her ribs. Each handprint along the wall began to glow as she passed, and voices stirred from them like women waking from shallow graves. Nera Ashen, Mare Frostval, Elira of the Northern Ford, Vienne Redwinter. Names. So many names. Not inventory. Not tribute. Names. Kael stood behind her, sword lowered, his eyes moving across the walls with something like reverence. Dravengard was told your line practiced enemy sorcery. Nera touched one glowing handprint. Ravenglen was told we were cursed. Both kingdoms were taught to fear the same mercy. The basin answered him with a low pulse. A vision opened in its empty center. Nera saw the first Winter Mercy woman standing between two wolf armies centuries ago. She cut her palm and let blood fall into snow. Both sides' wounded wolves stopped dying. The old kings knelt, not because she conquered them, but because she made killing useless for one night. Then fear returned. Men who could win by war could not rule easily beside women who made enemies live. The vision shifted. Winter Mercy daughters traded as brides. Then servants. Then omegas. Then names removed from law. Each generation buried lower than the last. Nera's breath shook. Kael's voice came quietly behind her. What does the vault need? The basin filled with red frost. The 100 voices answered. Not all your blood. The truth of who ordered it spilled. Nera frowned. Then the vault wall across from her cracked open, revealing a narrow shelf of white seals identical to the broken one in Kaelor's hand. Each seal held a war lie. Each lie had a name scratched beneath it. Audren Vale, Jaelor Vane, Ravenglen Crown, Border Council, Temple of Winter Law. Kael stared at the seals. The war was not one lie, he said. No, Nera whispered. It was a harvest. A sudden crash shook the vault. Above them, Kaelor had begun chanting. The red ice ceiling darkened. Kael stepped toward the stairs. He is sealing us in. Nera looked at the basin. One seal on the shelf pulsed brighter than the rest. The first lie. Ravenglen began the war. Nera took it in her hand. The red frost in the basin rose like a blade. Kael reached for her. Nera. She looked at him. You said we would not waste the descent. His jaw tightened. That was not permission to die. I am not dying for them. The seal burned cold in her hand. I am making them hear who did. She pressed the seal into the basin. The mercy vault screamed. Above, every wall of the frost hall split with red light. The vision burst upward through stone, ice, and throne banners, carrying the first lie into both courts at once. Every soldier saw it. Kaelor as a young king watching Odrin poison the border wells. Kael's black wolf, dragging frozen children from the water. Nera Ashen cutting her palm to save the enemy beast. And Ravenglen's crown choosing war because truth would have cost it power. The vault floor cracked beneath Nera. Kael caught her before she fell. This time, she did not stiffen. Above them, Kaelor's voice broke through the roaring vision. Enough. His golden wolf shadow plunged down through the fractured ceiling, jaws wide, blue frost pouring from its mouth straight toward Nera and the basin. Kael pulled her behind him, but the mercy vault spoke through every red handprint on the wall. No king stands before the daughter. The red light struck Kael first. Not to wound him, to move him aside. Nera stood alone before the incoming frost. Her blood rose in answer, and for the first time, it did not come from a cut. The blood rose beneath Nera's skin like dawn trapped under ice. No wound opened. No blade touched her. Still, red light spread from the center of her chest, down both arms, across her throat, and into the hollow beneath her collarbone where every winter had once taught her to make herself smaller. The mercy vault answered as if it had been waiting all her life for her body to stop asking permission to be true. Kaelor's golden wolf shadow crashed toward her through the fractured ceiling, jaws wide, blue death frost spilling from its mouth. Nera did not lift her hands to shield herself. She lifted them to receive. The frost struck her palms and stopped. The force of it drove her heels into the red ice floor, but it did not throw her back. Blue frost writhed against her skin, hungry and furious, trying to remember the command sealed into it. Enemy, enemy, enemy. Nera closed her fingers around the frost. No, she whispered. The mercy vault went silent. Then her blood spoke, not in words the court would have understood, not in song, in memory older than war law, older than treaty skin, older than kings who taught their wolves to inherit hate. The blue frost in her hands turned clear. For one breath, Nera saw every path it had taken. Jars carried through snow, wells poisoned under moonless sky, children drinking what their elders told them was safe, soldiers waking to find their dead blamed on a kingdom that had come too late to save them. She saw Sarah dragged below the frost hall, saw winter mercy daughters sold under famine law, saw omega pens filled with women whose bloodlines were too valuable to honor and too dangerous to free. Then she saw Kaelor, not as a king, as a boy with a crown too heavy for his hunger-shaken kingdom, watching Odrin place the first white seal in his hand. Say Ravenglen did this, and your throne survives. Young Kaelor had wept when he said it. That did not save him. A lie spoken through tears was still a lie. The vision burst outward. Above the vault, both courts saw it. Ravenglen soldiers saw their own king, as a youth naming Ravenglen guilty. Ravenglen warriors saw Kael's wolf dragging frozen children from the poisoned wells, not killing them. Northern and southern wolf shadows trembled as the truth entered them, too late to undo the dead, but not too late to shame the living. Kaelor cried out. His golden wolf shadow buckled in midair, the blue frost pouring from its jaws, turning red at the edges. Kael moved toward Nera, but the vault floor rose between them in a low ridge of red ice. Not rejection, protection. The mercy vault would not let a king stand in front of the daughter, not even one who meant to shield her. Nera felt that, and something in her almost broke from the tenderness of it. After a lifetime of chains, the first ancient law to recognize her did not cage her. It made room. Odrin's voice rang from above, sharp with panic. "Kill the wolf! If the warlord's beast lives, every border oath dies." Kael looked up. His black wolf shadow still lay at the stairwell, weakened and frost-cracked, but its eyes had opened fully. It watched Nera, not as a cure to be consumed, but as the one standing between every lie and its grave. Kaelor staggered at the broken edge of the hall. The cracked white seal in his hand bled blue light through his fingers. He stared down at Nera. "You do not understand what truth will cost." Nera looked up at him through the red glow rising from her skin. "I know what lies cost. I was raised inside the payment." The words struck Ravenglen harder than any spell. Somewhere above, a soldier dropped his sword. Then another. The sound traveled down into the vault like iron rain. Odrin turned on Kaelor. "Majesty, close the seal." Kaelor's hand trembled. For a moment, Nera saw the same boy from the vision, the one who had been afraid, ashamed, and weak enough to become cruel because other men called cruelty survival. Then Kaelor's face hardened. He lifted the seal. "I will not lose a kingdom to an Omega's blood." The golden wolf shadow roared, but the sound came out wrong, strained, forced. Its body twisted as blue frost tightened around its throat. Nera saw the truth then. Kaelor's wolf was not commanding the frost. It was being used by it, by the seal, by the first lie. A strange grief moved through her. Not pity for Kaelor. He had chosen too many times, but for the wolf shadow chained to his choices, made into a mouth for death. She lowered her hands. The clear frost in her palms sank into the basin. "Then I name the third lie," she said. Odrin went white. Kael's gaze sharpened from the stairwell. "Nera?" She looked at Kaelor's golden wolf shadow. Ravenglen did not only poison Dravengard's name. The mercy vault pulsed. Nera's voice steadied. It poisoned its own king's wolf and called obedience loyalty. The red handprints on the walls flared. Kaelor froze. The golden wolf shadow looked at Nera. For the first time, truly looked. Its eyes were not cruel. They were terrified. The vault showed the third lie. Young Kaelor kneeling after the border massacre, shaking as the first seal entered his palm. Odrin standing behind him. Priests of winter law cutting blue frost into the golden wolf shadow's mouth, so that whenever Kaelor tried to speak against the lie, his own wolf would choke him with winter. "You will learn," Odrin said in the memory, "that guilt is easier to govern when it cannot howl." The vision ended. The frost hall fell into a silence so complete it seemed even the dead were waiting. Kaelor dropped the seal. His hand went to his throat. His golden wolf shadow lowered its head, blue frost cracking around its jaws. Odrin backed away. "Necessary measures." Kael's voice rose from below, quiet and lethal. "Against your own king? Against weakness," Odrin snapped. "Against mercy. Against every soft-blooded impulse that turns wolves into mourners instead of rulers." Nera looked at him. At last, all his motives stood naked. Not patriotism. Not peace. Fear. He had built a war, because mercy made power uncertain. The red light around Nera dimmed suddenly. Her knees weakened. The vault had shown too much through her body. Kael broke through the red ridge this time, not by force, but by placing his hand upon it and waiting until it lowered. He reached Nera just as she swayed. His arm came around her back. She did not flinch. "You have named enough," he said. "No." Her voice was barely there. "Not while he still holds my mother." Odrin heard her. His fear twisted into decision. He turned from the broken hall and thrust the blue needle toward Sarah's frozen heart. The bone thing surged. Kael's wolf tried to rise. Kaelor shouted, "Odrin, stop!" But none of them reached him first. Nera did. Not her body, her blood. The red light shot from the Mercy Vault walls, through the stairs, across the tunnel, and into the ice holding Nera Ashen. Every handprint in the vault burned brighter, answering Nera's need. The blue needle struck Sarah's frozen chest and shattered. Sarah opened her eyes fully. The ice around her body cracked from crown to heel. Odrin stumbled back. No. Nera Ashen stepped out of the wall. Not young, not whole, not safe, but alive enough to bleed. She caught the broken needle in one trembling hand and looked at the man who had buried her for 20 years. "You should have killed Mercy," she said. Her fingers closed. The needle turned red. Above them, Kaelor's broken seal split apart. The frost vanished from his wolf shadow's mouth, and the golden wolf howled in pain for the first honest time in years. The golden wolf's howl split the frost hole open. Not the stone, the lie. Every banner above Ravenglen's soldiers snapped backward, as if struck by a storm from the past. The blue frost that had lived inside Kaelor's wolf shadow for years poured from its jaws in broken streams, falling like shattered glass across the treaty floor. Where each shard struck stone, a memory flashed. Kaelor trying to speak against Odrin and choking on Winter. Kaelor signing border executions with frost, blackened fingers. Kaelor ordering Omega pens sealed after asking once, only once, whether Nera Ashen had a child. Nera saw all of it. So did both courts. The Alpha King of Ravenglen had not been innocent, but he had not been untouched either. That truth did not soften what he had done. It made the wound uglier, harder to clean, impossible to bury under one villain's name. Nera Ashen stood in the tunnel below, barefoot on the ice that had held her prisoner for 20 years. Her hair hung in dark, wet ropes over her shoulders. Her skin was pale as winter wax. Red light pulsed faintly in her veins, not strong enough to heal the years stolen from her, but strong enough to keep her standing. Odrin stared at her as if a grave had broken etiquette by returning its contents. Kael's wolf shadow rose behind Nera, trembling with death frost, but no longer collapsing. The black beast lowered its head towards Sarah, and something like recognition moved through its frozen eyes. Sarah looked at it. "I remember you," she whispered. "You bit through your own tongue rather than drink from the second poisoned well." The wolf gave a low, broken sound. Kael's face changed. Nera felt the moment strike him, not as shock, as confirmation of a grief he had carried too long with no witness strong enough to hold it. Above them, Kaelor fell to one knee at the edge of the shattered hall. His golden wolf shadow crouched behind him, blue frost still cracking away from its jaws. It looked less royal now, more real, more wounded. Its eyes fixed on Odrin with a hatred that seemed newly born. Odrin backed toward the treaty table. "This changes nothing," he said. No one answered, so he raised his voice. "This changes nothing. Ravenglen still needs borders. Dravengard still needs blame. Winter still takes the weak. Mercy cannot govern famine." Nera stepped out from Kael's hold. Her legs shook, but she did not fall. Mercy was never given the chance. Odrin's eyes cut to her. "You think blood makes you wise?" "No," Nera said. "Hunger did." The words passed through the hall more quietly than a spell and struck harder. Some of Ravenglen's soldiers lowered their eyes. They knew hunger. They had been trained to believe Dravengard caused it, to believe Omega pens were unfortunate necessities, to believe treaties required bodies no one important would miss. Nera lifted the treaty skin with Sarah's name on it. "Your law bought my mother." She lifted the second strip from the broken table, the one with her own name written on skin. "Your peace sold me." Then she looked toward Kaelor. "And you called both survival. Kaelor did not deny it." That made the hall colder. Odrin seized the frozen wine knife from the table and cut his own palm. Blue blood-black frost welled from the wound. "Enough testimony." Sarah stiffened. "Nera, get away from him." But Odrin was not reaching for Nera. He slammed his bleeding hand onto the treaty table. The skin strips beneath Nera's fingers snapped taut. Her wrists jerked forward as if invisible chains had caught them again. Kael moved instantly, but the old treaty magic rose faster. Lines of blue frost shot from the table to the walls, from the walls to the ceiling, from the ceiling into every soldier's shadow. The frost hole became a web of oath ice. Odrin smiled, blood running down his wrist. Living tribute. Purchased mercy. Border flesh. You can name cruelty all night, girl, but names do not break signed law. The treaty skin around Nera's name burned cold. Her knees hit the stone. Kael's sword struck the blue web and rebounded with a burst of frost. His wolf shadow snarled, lunging, but the oath ice held it back by the throat. Sarah tried to climb from the tunnel, then staggered as old frost curled around her ankles. Kaelor stood slowly. The cracked white seal lay broken near his feet. His golden wolf shadow shook its head, finally free of the frost in its mouth, but weak from years of being used as a vessel for lies. Odrin looked at him. Majesty, reclaim your tribute. The hall waited. Nera looked at Kaelor and saw the old choice return to him. Fear or truth. Crown or confession. Power or the girl he had once found easier to sell than explain. Kaelor's face tightened. His hand lifted. Kael's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Do not. Odrin smiled. He must. Ravenglen law is clear. Kaelor's raised hand trembled. Then it turned. Not toward Nera. Toward Odrin. I revoke the sale. The words were quiet, but the treaty web shuddered. Odrin stared at him. You cannot revoke blood tribute after acceptance. Kaelor's mouth twisted. Then let the record show I was a coward before I was a king. His golden wolf shadow stepped forward, weak but upright. I sold Nera Ashen knowing her blood might expose the border lie. I permitted Odrin Vale to use famine law to hold Nera Ashen and her daughter as crown property. I called it peace because I feared what truth would cost my throne. The oath ice cracked. Ravenglen's soldiers stared at their king, as if they were watching a statue bleed. Odrin's composure shattered. You fool. Kaelor looked at Nera. There was no apology large enough in him. Perhaps there never would be. But for the first time, he did not try to make his smallness look noble. You were never tribute, he said. The treaty skin around Nera's name split down the center. Kael's wolf tore free with a roar. Odrin hurled the frozen wine knife toward Nera's heart. Kael caught it in his bare hand. The blade pierced through his palm. Death frost surged up his arm. His wolf shadow convulsed, frost racing across its chest again, faster than before. Nera lunged toward him. Kael caught her wrist with his uninjured hand. No. The word was brutal with restraint. She stared at him. Let go. If you pour yourself empty now, he wins. Odrin laughed, wild and furious. Listen to him, mercy girl. Let the enemy king die beautifully. It will make a cleaner song. Nera looked at Kael's hand around her wrist. Not a chain. A plea pretending to be command. His pale gray eyes held hers. Do not become another body this war spends. The words broke something open in her that pain had not reached. Sarah's voice rose from below. Nera. The mercy vault pulsed under the hall. The red handprints answered. Not all your blood. The truth of who ordered it spilled. Nera looked at the blue frost climbing Kael's arm, then at Odrin's bleeding hand still pressed to the treaty table. The old counselor had made law from blood, so law would answer blood. Nera turned her palm upward. Her cut had closed, but the red light remained. She pressed her healed palm not to Kael's wound, but to the treaty table beside Odrin's hand. Odrin's eyes widened. No. Nera's voice was barely above a whisper. I do not give my blood to your law. Red light spread from her palm into the table, meeting the blue oath frost at its root. I call your law to witness mine. The frost hole dropped into silence. Every treaty skin rose into the air. Every name written on flesh turned red. Nera Ashen. Nera Ashen. Unknown daughter. Unknown bride. Unknown cure. Unknown Omega. One by one, the words changed. Not property. Not tribute. Not cure. blood-bearing witness. Odrin screamed as the treaty table split beneath his hand. The blue frost rushed into him instead, following the blood signature that had maintained it for years. It climbed his arm, his throat, his mouth. Kaelor stepped back as Odrin fell to his knees. Kael's death frost stopped inches from his heart. Nera pulled the frozen knife from his palm. This time, her blood did not pour. Only one red drop fell onto the wound. The frost cracked. Kael breathed. His wolf shadow lifted its head behind him, black fur shaking loose sheets of blue-white ice. Not healed. Not yet. But no longer dying. Odrin clawed at his frost-sealed throat, unable to speak the next lie. Nera stood between both kings, the broken treaty table, and the opened mercy vault below. Her hands no longer wore chains. The red light in her veins faded to a steady glow beneath her skin. Kael looked at her, as if the world had rearranged itself and placed her where a throne should have been. "What are you now?" Kaelor whispered. Nera did not look away from Odrin. "The part of mercy you forgot to kill." Odrin froze from the mouth first. That was the mercy of the old law. It did not silence him. It made silence impossible. Blue oath frost sealed his lips open, then forced his own blood-marked law back through his throat. The treaty table lay split beneath his hand, and from its broken center rose every contract Ravenglen had hidden under famine, marriage, border, peace, and Omega ownership. The skin strips circled him like pale birds. Each one burned red. Each one waited. Nera stood before him with Kael's blood still warm on her fingers, and her own chains lying broken behind her. The red glow beneath her skin had faded to something quieter now, not weakness, but control. She no longer looked like a girl being spent by magic. She looked like someone deciding where mercy ended. "Speak it," she said. Odrin shook his head. The oath frost tightened. His back bowed. His eyes bulged. Then the first confession tore from him in a voice made of ice and blood. "I ordered the border wells poisoned under Ravenglen's seal, and named Dravengard guilty before the bodies thawed." The words struck the frost hall ceiling and spread across the ice beams in red fire. Ravenglen soldiers stared upward. Some fell to their knees. Not from loyalty, from shame. Odrin gasped, but the law he had fed for years dragged the next truth out of him. "I purchased Winter, Mercy daughters, through famine law, border bride contracts, temple custody, and Omega pen records." The skin strips changed as he spoke. Property became daughter. Cure became woman. Tribute became witness. Nera Ashen climbed slowly from the broken tunnel, one hand pressed to the ice wall for balance. Kael moved as if to help her, but she lifted a trembling hand to stop him. Pride held her upright where strength failed. Nera went to her instead. For one breath, mother and daughter stood facing each other with 20 years of winter between them. Nera touched Nera's cheek. Not fully, just the edge of her fingers, as if she feared her own hand might still be a prison. "They made you grow up hungry," Nera whispered. Nera's throat closed. "They made me think you left." Nera's eyes filled, but no tear fell. Perhaps the ice had taken too many. "I never stopped reaching." Nera leaned into her mother's hand then. Only once. Only briefly. But enough that the mercy vault below them pulsed red, and every handprint in its walls answered like a heartbeat. Kael looked away. Not because the moment shamed him, because he understood some wounds deserved privacy even in a hall full of kings. Odrin's next confession ripped the tenderness apart. "I bound Kael Draven's wolf with frost seal law so guilt could not turn him against me." Kaelor flinched. His golden wolf shadow stood behind him now with its jaws free of blue frost, but its body remained thin, shaken, and scarred by years of forced obedience. It looked at its king without forgiveness. Kaelor lowered his head. No crown could hide the smallness of that gesture. "I let him," Kaelor said. The hall turned toward him. The Alpha King of Ravenglen looked older than he had before the treaty began. Beauty had drained from him, leaving only the man underneath, afraid, guilty, and too late to be innocent. "I was young when Odrin gave me the first seal," he said. "But I was not a child when I used the lie after that. I kept the war because it kept my nobles loyal. I kept the Omega pens because they kept the mercy line hidden. I sold Nera Ashen because I feared what her blood would prove." Nera listened. Her face did not soften. That mattered. Kaelor looked at her as if waiting for a blade. "I cannot ask pardon." "No," Nera said. "You cannot." The words were quiet, but they reached every corner of the hall. Kaelor accepted them with a single nod. Then he removed the gold wolf ring from his hand and set it on the broken treaty table. "Until the border houses judge me, I surrender war authority over Ravenglen." A shock moved through his soldiers. Kael's eyes narrowed. "To whom?" Kaelor looked at Nera. "No," she said at once. For the first time, something like bitter humor crossed Kael's face. It vanished quickly. Kaelor swallowed. "To a council formed from both kingdoms, Dravengard, Ravenglen, border families, and Winter, mercy witnesses." Nera looked at the red-lit skin strips still circling Odran. "Not witnesses only in name," she said. Kaelor's jaw tightened, but he nodded. With binding voice, Sira's hand closed around Nera's. Kael stepped forward then, blood still darkening the bandage wrapped around his palm. His black wolf shadow followed, slower now, still wounded but alive. The beast lowered its head beside Nera, and this time its frost-cracked muzzle did not seek her blood. It simply breathed near her hand. Nera looked down at it. "You still need healing." Kael's voice came low. "Not if it empties you." The hall heard him. Nera did too. She remembered every time Ravenglen had taken from her and called it use. Every bowl of scraps named mercy. Every chain named precaution. Every law that had taught her body was valuable only when someone else needed it. So she turned her palm upward. No cut opened. Red light gathered there, small and steady. "Then you will not take," she said. "You will receive what I choose to give." Kael went still. His wolf shadow bowed its great head, not to drink, but to ask. Only then did Nera place her glowing palm against the frozen wound in its chest. The healing did not burst like fire. It moved slowly, like spring remembering a buried river. The death frost cracked one final time, falling from the black wolf shadow in pale sheets. Beneath it, the beast's darkness deepened, rich and whole, though silver scars remained where the curse had lived too long to vanish. Kael inhaled sharply. His eyes closed for one heartbeat. When he opened them again, the cold in them was still there. It belonged to him, but behind it, something living had returned. His wolf stood fully. The frost hall shook as every Dravengard warrior lowered one knee. Kael did not look at them. He looked at Nera. "You saved my wolf," he said. Nera withdrew her hand. "Your wolf chose to live. And you?" The question was soft enough that only those nearest could hear it. Nera looked at the broken chains on the floor, then at the treaty skin burning with new words, then at her mother standing beside her alive, wounded, and free. "I choose to stop being carried between kings." Kael bowed his head once, then walk. No claim, no demand, no hand closing around her wrist, just space. Nera stepped away from the treaty table. The red light beneath the hall rose through the cracked floor, lifting every hidden Winter Mercy name into the air. Women's names burned across the walls, the ceiling, the banners, even the blades of soldiers who had sworn to wars they had never understood. Mara Frostvalle, Elira of the Northern Ford, Vienna Redwinter, Nera Ashen, Nera Ashen. Odrin knelt beneath them, trapped in his own law, forced to read each name aloud until his voice broke into frost. At dawn, the frost hall doors opened. No treaty was signed that morning. No Omega was exchanged. No false peace was blessed over frozen wine. Instead, Ravenglen and Dravengard carried their dead out of the lies that had held them. The border wells were named murder sites. The Omega pens were opened. The Mercy Vault remained unsealed, not as a prison beneath the hall, but as a record no king could close alone. Sarah walked into the pale morning with Nera's arm around her waist. Kael followed a few paces behind, his restored black wolf shadow at his side. He did not walk as an owner claiming tribute. He walked like a warlord learning, step by step, how not to turn gratitude into a chain. At the threshold, Nera paused. Snow fell over the courtyard. For the first time in her life, winter did not feel like punishment. Kael stopped beside her, leaving enough space for her to choose whether to close it. "I have no right to ask you to stay," he said. "No," Nera answered. "You don't." His mouth tightened, accepting the wound. Then she looked at his wolf, at her mother, at the open gates between two kingdoms that had spent years feeding each other ghosts. "But I may have a reason." Kael's eyes lifted to hers. Nera stepped into the snow. Behind her, the chains that had brought her to Dravengard lay broken on the frost hall floor. Before her, the road between enemy kingdoms waited, no longer sealed by a body sold as tribute, but opened by a woman whose mercy had survived every hand that tried to bury it. She had not been the abandoned Omega. She had been the blood Winter failed to kill. The end.